Now, the Institute of Risk Management South Africa has sounded the alarm about the country's multiple crises. Its 9th annual risk report stresses the urgent need to address economic constraints, environmental matters and corruption. To discuss this further, we're joined by the board member of the Institute of Risk Management South Africa, Nicola Comninos. Good morning to you, Nicola, and thank you so much for joining us. Just by definition, what is crises that we are facing in the country?
Hi, good morning, Cindy. Really great to be chatting to you this morning. So yes, the Institute of Risk Management of South Africa releases an annual report. It's the 9th edition. We're a non-profit organization, so I volunteer as a board member and also sit on the Risk Intelligence Committee, which is made up of a whole variety of business leaders in South Africa. And we get together annually to put our heads together and see what are the things that can potentially come across our paths in the near future. And a polycrisis is the one that we've identified in this year's report. And what it really talks to is multiple crises potentially materializing all simultaneously in quick succession, being complex in nature, and unfortunately interconnected, interrelated, and a whole variety of risks, which is spanning different types like digital, economic, fraud, corruption, and at all different levels, locally, regionally, in both the public and private sector. And so that would really result in a polycrisis if all of these happen. And as I've mentioned, the metrics of simultaneously, in quick succession, complex, and interconnected.
No, but we're literally in the eye of the storm, as you were saying, with all these multiple occurrences happening. Just not only the load shedding, unemployment at a very high levels, almost 40%. We're also dealing with high levels of crime and citizens protesting because of service delivery, etc. So what is the mitigating factors then, at least, that stand in our favor as a country to deal with these polycrises?
Yes, exactly, Cindy. Look, as risk managers, that's music to my ears. It's so important for everyone to focus on what are the things we can do. And one of the things we talk about in this year's report is that we need to lead where we stand. So irrespective of your role in society, irrespective of what capacity you serve in, let's see what are the differences we can make in those specific areas. So there's 11 calls to action that we've included in this year's report. I'm not going to go through all of those, but just to highlight some of those. And one of them that I'm extremely passionate about, myself working for a fintech startup group, Purple Group, having startup businesses in our group like Easy Equities, is that one of the call to actions is that we have to support entrepreneurs and small, medium and micro enterprises. That's extremely important for economic development. We have to help innovate, support research and development so that we can increase our country's competitiveness and that we can address things like job creation. That's one of the key elements that was identified under the mitigating actions. One of the other ones is strengthening the rule of law, investing in law enforcement, practically protecting whistleblower interests, looking at the wonderful work that people like Cynthia Stimple is doing at Whistleblower House, another whistleblower like Athol Williams recently being recognized by Oxford University, supporting those types of individuals, making sure that we protect them and that we're able to root out corruption.
All right, we just see recently sorry, Nicola, just very quickly looking at the artificial intelligence and the benefits thereof, but potential threats as well. How well protected are we when it comes to cybersecurity, particularly with sensitive information around identity theft, etc.?
Yeah, Cindy, look, that is one of the top risks globally. It's also year on year identified in the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report. It's something that we've identified this year again in the Institute of Risk Management of South Africa's risk report. Are those digital threats? The reality is the criminals are just getting smarter. So we have to make sure that we continuously invest in this space, that we have the right expertise, information security officers, that we have early detection systems. And like you said, we have to embrace technology like artificial intelligence that can potentially help and solve itself presenting a risk, which you have to make sure that we protect ourselves against, making sure we protect our information and we put controls in place to put those guardrails up, but also leveraging that type of technology to protect our businesses against cyber threats.
Yeah, but we also have the environmental risk as well, as we've seen with the outbreak of cholera, people even opting to purchase water or rather other means of purifying water as well. How much of a big problem is this or risk according to your report?
Cindy, so it was definitely one of the top 9 risks that was identified. If we look at the World Economic Forum, a global risk report that was released earlier this year, it's actually, if you look at their longer term horizon, out of their top 5 risks, 4 of the 5 risks are environmental risks. And so we don't include a specific timeline in the South Africa risk report, but certainly we've seen that risk materialize in different elements, in different regions where we've had droughts and floods, etc. So we on the African continent are certainly seeing and bearing the brunt of climate change. So very important, again, to just go back to that call to action, important for us as business leaders to focus on this concept and notion of sustainability, investing in job creation, building skills so that we understand how do we deal with climate change, how do we protect biodiversity, how do we invest in things like renewable energy, which you can see the interconnected nature of the risks, which then talks to things like the energy crisis.
Yes, and I mean, this obviously would put even more pressure on government, primarily because they have to deal with a multitude of needs, and not only to provide basic services, but how the taxes are also distributed in terms of infrastructure.
Yes, exactly. Cindy, we've actually identified in the report what we've done this year, which is a bit unique to other years, is we've taken all of the 9 risks and we've plotted them against the 6 government priorities, which are linked to the National Development Plan and aligned to the Global United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And so let me use an example. One of the top 6 government priorities being restoring the energy security, we've linked that to the risk of a national grid failure. One of the things, the government priorities being making government work, we've linked those to 2 risks, which is systemic failure of public infrastructure, like you've mentioned, and then political instability. So we've made sure that this report really links into those key priorities, and also doing a little bit of a probability assessment in terms of what we can do in our various roles in both public and private sector to help support government in terms of addressing and realizing those priorities. But the reality is, if we don't do something where we stand as business leaders, we can see ourselves in a situation of a polycrisis.
Nicola, always a pleasure, and I promise I'm going to practice your surname. Maybe I should just say it slowly or phonetically so I get it right next time, but always a pleasure speaking to you. That is from the Institute of Risk Management, South Africa, Nicola Comninos.